All right, today we're jumping into a really big topic, one where cutting-edge science collides with some of our oldest beliefs. We're talking about embryo research. It's a subject that sparks some seriously intense debate, and we're going to break it all down to get right to the heart of what's at stake.
So here's our game plan. First step, we'll get clear on what we're actually talking about. Then we'll dive straight into the core ethical debate, explore two major and very different views, one from a faith perspective and one from a non-religious one. And finally, we'll ask, is there a middle ground? Let's get into it.
So this is it. This is the question right at the heart of the whole thing. And honestly, how you answer this pretty much shapes the entire conversation. Are we looking at a potential person, or are we looking at a potential cure for millions of people? The stakes just couldn't be any higher. Okay, so to really get our heads around this debate, we first need to be crystal clear on what the science actually is. So what are we really talking about here? Well, simply put, embryo research is when scientists study human embryos to figure out how we develop, and crucially, to find ways to fight some absolutely devastating illnesses. I mean, the potential here is just massive. Imagine a future where we could treat or even cure a whole range of inherited diseases. And conditions like Parkinson's, motor neuron disease, and dementia. That's the incredible promise that's really driving this science forward. Okay, so now for the really tricky part, the core ethical debate. The conflict really kicks off because there are two fundamentally different ways of seeing the world. And at the heart of it all are two powerful and clashing ideas about what gives a life value. And this slide, wow, it really lays out the two completely opposite poles of the argument. On one side, you have the sanctity of life view. This idea says that life is sacred, a gift from God, right from the very beginning. But on the other side, you've got the greater good, or utilitarian view, which says, hold on, the best action is the one that creates the most benefit for the most people. So let's dig into that first idea, the sanctity of life, by looking at the Roman Catholic position. It's one of the strongest and most consistent voices arguing for this point of view.
This verse from the Bible, it's absolutely key to understanding this viewpoint. For many Christians, this shows that God has a personal, creative relationship with a human being right from the very, very start. It means that life inside the womb isn't just biological material, it's seen as a person in the making, part of the human community, already under God's care.
So it all boils down to this, really. The Roman Catholic Church has a very clear line. Personhood begins at the moment of conception. And if you believe an embryo is a person with full human status and rights, well then using it for research, no matter how good the reason seems, is seen as treating a person as an object, just a means to an end. Plus you've got the issue of consent, right? An embryo can't say yes. Ultimately, from this perspective, it's seen as humans overstepping our bounds and playing God. Okay, so now let's completely flip the script and look at this from a totally different angle. The utilitarian perspective doesn't start with any sacred rules. Instead, it starts by looking at the consequences of our actions. And this is a fantastic way to see how that utilitarian thinking works. It's like a logical chain. You just follow it step by step. You start with the action, research on embryos. You look at the potential result, cures for horrible diseases. And then you weigh the final outcome, a world with way less pain and suffering for millions of people who are alive right now. From this point of view, the conclusion is pretty clear. The research isn't just okay, it's a moral good because it helps the most people. You see the difference here? The focus isn't on when personhood begins, but on the real-world impact on the lives of people who are already suffering. So we've seen these two very different, almost polar opposite views. But does it have to be an all-or-nothing kind of thing? Well, some religious traditions have tried to find a more nuanced path, a kind of middle ground. Many Protestant churches, for example, take a different approach. They often accept a limited and very carefully regulated form of research. This comes down to a couple of key ideas. First, there's a practical argument about surplus IVF embryos. You see, during IVF treatment, more embryos are often created than are needed, and these would otherwise be destroyed. So the thinking goes, why not let some good come from them? And second, they often connect this research to the Christian call for compassion. They argue that if Jesus was a healer, then using our God-given intelligence to find new ways of healing is a morally good thing to do. And that really brings us back to the question for all of us, doesn't it? As you can see, there are no easy answers here. On one hand, we have this incredible, mind-blowing potential to relieve a huge amount of human suffering. And on the other, we have deeply held, sincere beliefs about the sacredness of life from its very first spark. How we, as a society, decide to balance these two things is one of the most significant ethical challenges of our time.